Welcome to our webinar about trusted access and the journey towards a more secure, modern workplace. My name is Polley, and I'm joined by Lloyd Thomas from Jamf. How you going, Lloyd?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
That's awesome. Well, look, we just want to give, some context for this session today. We've really found as Compnow with our customers over the last kind of couple of years that this journey towards understanding how to decentralize from the on-premise network in the office and really expand to a global modern workforce has been an interesting journey for a lot of organizations. Today, we really want to chat about the tools that Jamf has to take, the MDM tools, to take some of the identity tools and other things and tie them really all together to create a posture of device and user trust. We really think this is going to be a great way to dive into how it can really apply to a lot of our customers here in Australia. So, Lloyd, do you want to take us through what you have today?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, really excited to be here. My name's Lloyd. I'm the manager of our channel sales team. And today I'm going to be running you through what we call trusted access. So beginning that journey towards a more modern and secure workplace and work environment. So let's just jump in. We've got a bit of an agenda to go through. We're first going to introduce Jamf for those who don't know who Jamf is. We'll then talk about Apple at work and some of the trends that we see in the workplace. And first, more importantly, we're going to talk about trusted access, what it is and how you can adopt it as a strategy in your environment. We'll finish the session, Aaron, with some nice Q&A as well. So hopefully, if you've got questions through this content, I'd love to hear it and we can have a bit of a back and forth. So introduction to Jamf, if you haven't heard of us, I guess our whole mission is to help organizations succeed with Apple. And you can really think of it as the bridge between what Apple creates for its customers and what the enterprise requires. So if you've got Apple devices out there, really getting the most out of it, most out of the use cases, that's where Jamf really helps its customers. So we're going to talk about some of these use cases today. But before we do that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the organization that I work for, which is Jamf in terms of our customer base. So you can see on the slide here, we work with over 71,000 customers today, and 30 million devices are running Jamf. So very, incredible stats that you can see on the screen here. In terms of customers, we work from small to very large. 22 out of the 25 largest brands in the world are using Jamf, and you'll probably be very familiar with many of those brands today, which is great credibility to the solution that we offer customers. So let's talk about Apple generally in the workplace, some of the trends that we see in our customers. I think really interesting to see is that often customers and users are adopting Apple devices more than other platforms when offered choice. This statistic on the top left here, 75% of users actually would choose an iPhone based on recent surveys over other platforms, and they prefer that device to be more productive in a mobility standpoint. I think, I looked at some of the latest statistics in terms of actual penetration and adoption, which is really interesting. 67% in enterprise and government are actually using iPhone today, which is quite a significant number, right? When we look at the Mac, whilst the, penetration isn't quite as high, we have seen, very much a bigger preference for macOS today as well. So 72% based on Forrester's survey would say that they would prefer a Mac over a Windows device, which is interesting. And another statistic, sorry to throw all the stats out there, but over the last 3 years, Mac has grown 60%, whilst Windows has grown just 6%. So you can see that users are after the Apple device to be productive in the workplace. So let's talk a little bit about, the threat landscape when it comes to Apple. And there's no, questions asked that we feel Apple is much more secure as an operating system compared to other platforms. But as that kind of, penetration increases, so does the attack surface, and hackers have started to recognize that in the workplace.
As it's more desired, right? As you said, it's an increasing platform of choice, which means that for an attacker, it's an increasing opportunity, right?
Exactly that. And I think there's just certain areas to consider when it comes to Apple where there are increased risks. And I think mobile for sure is that attack vector that people haven't really thought too much about. But of course, it's brought much more benefits in terms of productivity for users and enterprises. But of course, the nature of a mobile device is that it doesn't connect to the corporate network. There are multiple avenues when it comes to phishing. So our latest Security report, you can see here, 31% of organizations last year said that one of their users at least fell victim to a mobile phishing attack. I guess I see this often with customers that they've invested in an email filter, but on mobile you've got SMS that we're all being spammed by, claiming you've got ATO credit, but from the recent tax returns alike. Right?
I could actually speak really personally that I've been getting a lot of post office fake phishing texts and things as of late, so it's definitely increasing.
That's just people giving you all the favorite gifts out there. So,
I'm sure.
Nonetheless, very crafty and very sophisticated often, and people are just clicking on these links, giving away their credentials, and that's all it takes for a major cyber attack. So a very big one and a common one for mobile. Outside of that is things like Wi-Fi networks. So we have executives that are often traveling to high-risk countries. They're connecting to airport lounges and cafes that ultimately can leak credentials as well as company data that the applications are being used on these devices. And topical, I think I included this statistic, is the latest trends that we've seen around the federal government, blocking things like TikTok, non-compliant categories on a mobile can often be very difficult. So we're going to talk about how we help customers in this respect from a device and a network perspective.
Yeah, that's great.
I guess one other stat, and we'll come on to the next slide quickly, but is around patch management. And iOS, as we said, is a really secure platform, but you really got to make sure these devices are updated. We found that 2/3 of iPhones updated to the iOS 16 last year within the first 3 months, but the remaining third actually didn't update for 3 months and they were still on iOS 15. So susceptible to OS vulnerabilities and exploits on the device. And as we look into the Mac side of things, it becomes ever more prevalent that you need an Apple-specific threat intelligence to detect these new threats that are coming out specific for the macOS. Now, I'm sure many of you on the webinar today will be familiar with a tool called VirusTotal, which is an online platform that you can essentially upload files and malicious URLs to identify which vendors and categories these files are in the threat landscape. Our team, the Threat Labs team, are a team of cyber threat researchers that are specific for Apple. So they're looking for these new vulnerabilities. And what's really interesting is that 39% of macOS threats caught this year by this team aren't even known to VirusTotal. Outside of that, 29 of the known files that were not detected as malicious by other security vendors. So overall, this is quite a staggering statistic, right? You've got over half of the macOS threats that our team are picking up are not even known to the general public or other vendors out there. So I guess the message here is you need to have a specific tool that is looking for the threats that are coming out on the Apple platform. Otherwise, you really are in a blind spot.
Yeah, I think I definitely saw a few releases over the last year especially, where actually the Jamf team has been called out for vulnerabilities that have been patched in Apple releases, which is incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, funny you say that, Aaron, because it's as if you knew what slides were coming up. And here you can see some of those examples from the blog post. This, if you haven't seen it already, I'd really recommend checking out our security blogs. This is where our threat research team are working with the marketing team to analyze the zero-day vulnerabilities. So 2 on the right, really common examples across iOS and macOS where we've detected zero-day exploits in the operating system, notified Apple and other vendors, and we can give you a really good summary there. The other example is mobile spyware, very sophisticated spyware targeting high-profile individuals in organizations. And I guess the kind of message here is we have this intelligence that you can embed into your security orchestrations if you're really interested. So we've talked quite heavily about the adoption of Apple in the workplace. And then we've also talked about, I guess, the threat landscape in itself, right? So what we're really going to focus on for the next part of the webinar is the concept of trusted access, what it can solve for you and how you can approach it with the capabilities that Jamf offer, which you can see on the slide here. Device management, identity and access, and endpoint security are the real foundations of what we can support customers with. And over the next few slides, this circular motion and how you can achieve trusted access is really what we're going to dive deep into. Now, in order to achieve this concept of trusted access, we need to ensure that only authorized users on enrolled devices that are free of risk and are in compliance with your corporate policy can access sensitive data, right? So this is what we're going to talk about over the next couple of slides. how you can achieve trusted access with Jamf. And it starts with enrolling devices. If IT don't have visibility at a minimum of the devices that are connecting to applications, you're really at a bad starting point. From our perspective, Apple provides two unique enrollment workflows that every organization can adopt. Starting with corporate devices, automated enrollment allows companies to have that zero-touch deployment experience, which you can see on the screen, setting up devices in a very compliant way that is in line with the company policies and allow users to get access to the tools very quickly and seamlessly. In a BYOD scenario, Apple's user enrollment, very new, but very unique in its approach to have that container approach in a BYOD scenario. Think of it as the user can sign in to the business side of the device and access those corporate resources where the company can control that portion of the applications and data. On the personal side of the device, really is invisible to the business, right? So the privacy is paramount to this unique enrollment workflow. What you can see on the screen here is a bit more of a visual representation of that, where the bottom half is really containerized. So your business applications like Office 365, it might even be some sensitive SaaS or on-prem applications are enrolled through management with Jamf. On the top half, you can see complete privacy, where general internet browsing, your personal WhatsApp messages, your SMS messages are completely blind to the business. The DLP policies are really critical here, and what you can see through Jamf's cloud infrastructure, that connectivity component is going to become really important as we go through the presentation here as well.
I remember attending JNUC actually last year over in San Diego when Dean got up on stage, the CEO of Jamf, and demonstrated on his own phone kind of what that looked like. It was a really, really powerful, powerfully simple, I guess, experience that if you actually understand what's going on under the hood, there's lots of moving parts there.
Oh, absolutely.
But, yeah, it was pretty fantastic.
For sure. I think we adopted it very heavily. And as a personal user, it's a great experience where, you know, you've got that balance between work and personal. So
yeah, I definitely see a lot in our customer base and the people that I chat to, that idea of, but can IT erase my phone? And the answer is no.
Exactly.
With this workflow, they can't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the company data, you know, you leave the business, of course, you don't want to take that with you, and the IT team want to make sure they've got control of that as well.
100%.
So, very interesting, but glad that Dean's presentation resonates. So then we talk about, you know, we've enrolled the device, but we also want to make sure that the users that are connecting on these devices are who they say they are, right? They're an employee of yours or they're a third-party contractor, and this is where verifying identities become really important. So I guess the good news is from our side, we work with all the leading identity providers, Okta, Azure AD, and the likes, where you can seamlessly make sure that provisioning the local accounts with users' cloud identity is part of your organizational strategy. Not only does this benefit the users, where you can sync the passwords from the cloud IDP down to the device, but also from an IT perspective, you can control those password policies, how often the user needs to update, the complexity. So there's a real security benefit involved here as well. Now, again, thinking about that workflow, we've made sure the devices are enrolled. We have made sure the user is who they say they are through the identity. And now we want to make sure before that user connects to that business critical tool, the device is actually compliant. And it's obviously free of risk. This is where protecting the endpoint is really critical. So auditing device security benchmarks becomes very much a control that IT can configure on the Mac device. And we have a really rich tool that I would really recommend you check out called Compliance Editor, which is a way to simplify that process. Outside of that, of course, we have endpoint security capabilities. So built for the Mac, we have a tool called Jamf Protect, where we're using the endpoint security framework built by Apple, which is very unique in the marketplace compared to other vendors that are very focused on Windows. This is a major benefit because we can block quarantine on the device in a very performant way that doesn't impact user privacy as well as the performance as well.
I can definitely speak to, over the last 15 years managing Apple devices, seeing some tools and products basically take their Windows device code, port that to a Mac, and usually maybe about 30% less productivity on that device. It can be a bit jarring for the end users that have to experience that.
Yeah, well, I'm not glad that you've experienced it for your users, but it's definitely happening. And of course, Apple release the new update every now and again, and simply put, other vendors don't keep up with that. And then all of a sudden you can't access the application, all your other tools are getting in the way. So this is definitely a benefit.
Our customers using Jamf Protect definitely noticed that performance benefit for sure.
I'm glad you said that on the webinar today. I guess outside of this, from our perspective, we also had the leading mobile threat defense solution in the market. So you can see on the screen here, not only we're doing endpoint protection, but we're also doing network security. So things like the man-in-the-middle type use case, the phishing use case, the vulnerability assessment on the device, we can now layer that across both Mac and mobile. Now, coming on to that use case around network security, we've got two little demos here to explain the use case around phishing. And you can see on the screen, the users received a dodgy email from Apple, and on the mobile, an SMS phishing link from Microsoft. We have that DNS filtering capabilities that we know when a phishing link has been detected, and not only detected, but our machine learning model in the network will make sure that when a user does click this link that they're blocked, and they receive some nice user notifications to notify when that's happened as well. One thing to make clear here is not only do we talk about threats, but we're also solving that use case around acceptable use. So that TikTok stat we talked about earlier, where users need to block it not only from a device level, but a network and browser level, you can use the DNS filtering to block non-compliant categories. TikTok, it could be illegal, it could be adult or gambling as an example that most of our customers are using today. And one of the final elements of trusted access is making sure the users are connecting to the applications really securely and seamlessly. At Jamf, we have a full zero trust network access model where we're continuously assessing the device posture, and we can then enable seamless access to the applications, whether those are hidden behind a firewall on-prem or they're SaaS-based, such as SharePoint and Office 365. Locking that device down with dedicated infrastructure and IPs is really critical to this story.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think if you look at a traditional organization that has, say, a VPN, right, virtual private network, because in IT we love our acronyms. Look, a VPN is one of those things that often it is not a great user experience, right? You have to remember that, oh, I'm accessing that application or that internal website. Okay, now I need to connect, and it's very a jarring experience, I know, for a lot of end users. And in some cases, a badly configured VPN is really slow internet as well, right? Because you try to push all your traffic through that pipe. And so I guess, how do you see this solution be different to that traditional kind of painful VPN?
Yeah, definitely. We absolutely hear those pain points, and I think the overarching theme is this is a very different way to do remote access. Often VPN solutions don't tie into the identity provider, so it's difficult to know if that's a secure and the user that is connecting to your on-prem network that has your crown jewels, right? And then coming on to your point around the actual performance and the user experience, you constantly have to update certificates and you have to remember the passwords, whereas what we're doing here is you simply log in with the IDP, that one-time login, and you access those applications that are tunneled through our infrastructure.
So I guess a way of saying that is, with a traditional VPN, you're trusting the device once and you're trusting the user once, where really in your models, that continuous evaluation of all of the pieces of the puzzle coming together, right? Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think that's the whole purpose of trusted access, which ties in nicely to this next slide actually, is automation and remediation. Ultimately, things go wrong, and you'll at home know IT can sometimes be difficult and security events do happen. Ultimately, you need to have an automated response that is in real time to update the device, to update the application, notify the users, and having that core foundation of device management at Jamf, we can enable that. More importantly, because of the network security controls and application access through our zero trust model, is that real-time risk assessment to terminate access to the applications in real time is really pivotal to this story as well.
So I guess you could say it's a better together story.
Absolutely, Aaron. I think it's kind of the embedded kind of message that we're talking about here with trusted access is bringing together management and security built for Apple, all working together is really kind of the message. So I'm glad that came through in some of the slides. And thank you all at home for joining. And we will have a bit of a discussion about some of the topics that we've covered today.
Awesome. Look, really appreciate that, Lloyd. I think it was a great discussion around how, as we just said, all the pieces of the story tie together, all the technical components and how they all work together. So look, I guess this part of the session, I really wanted to ask some questions that I've been asked by our customers when talking about these Jamf solutions, so that we can kind of get some, I guess, valuable feedback in terms of the questions we're being asked. So one of the areas that one of the thoughts, I guess, that I get asked is around firewalling. So we'll have lots of customers that will have, that on-premise, on-campus firewall solution. And so a question I get is, my firewall does internet filtering. Why would I use a Jamf network security tool? Like, what's the value of that if I already have that perimeter-based filtering? Yeah.
It's a great question, and I think something that comes up quite often with customers. I think the overall premise here is that the old way of doing security, where you are always in the office and connected to the corporate network, is definitely not here in this age. We live in a world of mobile and remote working, where most of the traffic on these corporate devices are exposed to the general internet. And the general internet, unfortunately, is just not a secure place. So our DNS filtering, no matter where the device is, we can filter that traffic for malware, we can filter that traffic for security events like phishing, like we talked about. So the message is, you need both. You need a firewall and you need something at home and on the road.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. One of the other questions we get is around antivirus solutions. So I definitely get customers who say that they already have antivirus solutions on their Mac fleet. That could often be maybe a cross-platform solution, something that they have for Windows and they've also installed on their Mac fleet. So why, if I'm a customer in that situation, why do I need Jamf's endpoint security solution?
Very good. I think going back to one of the slides earlier around probably the virus total slide, where we saw that a lot of the threats we pick up on Apple are not detected by other tools, is probably the key takeaway there. Is if you're not looking in the right places, you're not going to detect the right threats that are being brought up in this day and age. The other thing I would say is there's actually a place for both. There's capabilities that we have that a lot of tools out there just don't have, like logging of the device and sending information to a SIEM. So I would say Jamf Protect from an endpoint perspective will provide you with that rich insights that security and compliance teams really need. And of course, it probably came throughout there is the performance and privacy as well. We built in line with Apple, right? So we just make sure that the frameworks that we build are in line with what Apple offer for performance benefits for the user as well.
No, that's awesome. Another kind of area that I hear about is around mobile devices. So a question I have is, my mobile users are managed by another UEM, another unified endpoint management tool, but we don't have any antivirus or phishing protection. Why would I go into a Jamf tool set to support that?
Good question. And I guess we recognize at Jamf that you have different tools that can somewhat make up that trusted access kind of workflow. We believe, of course, it's better together, as you said, from Jamf, from management. But if you are using another tool like Intune, for example, on the MDM side for iOS, you can absolutely layer on top our security capabilities with Intune. So again, a better together with another solution. We can have, I guess, this security from an endpoint perspective pushed down via another MDM. So you've got that device level security as well as the network security all deployed silently. And a lot of our customers are in that model. So you can prevent those phishing attacks. And that ATO scam that, Aaron, you're giving away these days is not going to happen in future.
Yeah, no, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned TikTok earlier. We have customers that, that, as you said, have brought that up in discussion, and I hear often that, they want to block this from being accessed on devices. Can you just come back to that and just speak to that again in a bit more detail?
Definitely. I think, obviously, federal governments are needing to block this at all sources today. And many of our big enterprise customers and down to SMBs are looking to do the same. The challenge that we typically are finding here is management on the device will only do half the job. So with Jamf, we can application block, the device from an iOS management perspective, but the network layer is where we can also couple that. So if you think about unsupervised devices, for example, where you can't control the application, we can at least block connectivity of TikTok to make sure that that device is in compliance with some of the policies that the government have introduced. And across the board, this doesn't just mean iOS. We can actually support some other non-Apple devices with the DNS filtering, funnily enough, so you can control that access at its source in the network.
Oh, great. That's really cool to hear. One of the other questions that comes up is around our existing Jamf customer base. As you may or may not know, we brought your original tooling in the name of Casper many years ago to Australia, and so we have a pretty large customer base who have been Jamf Pro users for a very long time.
Yep.
And so I guess speaking to that audience and some questions I get from them, what advantage does an existing Jamf Pro customer have in adopting this new Jamf Trusted Access framework?
It's a great question. Of course, we've taken a lot of customers on that journey over time, starting with management and through to our security pillars today. So I'd say the overarching benefit of that is that, I guess, closed loop from a security perspective, where inevitably something does go wrong, our security tools will automatically enable the device management tool to take action quickly and seamlessly. I heard a good, story recently that customers have other security tools that will be flagging a ServiceNow ticket. And ultimately, if you're relying on a ServiceNow ticket where a user's been detected a severe threat, it's going to take too long, right? And we're in kind of lockstep between management and security to action those severe threats in real time.
So I guess a way of saying that is, because you have already that Jamf tool that is managing the device and has all of the capabilities to remediate, pairing that with now these new parts of the Jamf solution, it's just a loop that can feed itself. So as something is identified, it can remediate and just make that more continuous and improving.
For sure.
Yeah.
And of course, there's other solutions out there, but if they're not talking to each other, like your EDR, endpoint security, is talking to your remote access VPN solution and the identity piece, it's a bit too difficult to make sure that the security on the device is in line with your policies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, very good, very good. So another question I get a lot actually is around customers that use Microsoft, now called Entra, Azure AD as it was formerly known, and really just that I'm trying to really understand why to add another access tool, another trust tool, when conditional access is a key part of the Microsoft Entra story these days. Can you speak to that, why there's value in still going ahead with the Jamf Trusted Access?
Absolutely. I think identity is the foundation, right, that we've talked about in terms of making sure the user is who they say they are when they're looking to access the application that has been configured with conditional access. It's a great foundation, but what you're really missing there is that connectivity piece and the transport layer between the device and the application itself. So we talked about earlier, the internet isn't a safe place. So if you're exposing your applications to the general internet, you wouldn't do that with your on-prem network. Why would you do that with your SaaS applications? So having that trusted security layer is what we're looking to offer with Jamf Trusted Access. And what you can do is lock those applications down to have a dedicated IP just for your organization so that you can make sure it's seamless access above and beyond Azure AD.
No, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. One of the last questions here, I'd really love to hear a good news story from here in ANZ of someone adopting Jamf Trusted Access and really solving a real problem. Can you speak to a story that we have here?
Yeah, for sure. And one of Compnow's customers actually, who, like you said, adopted our management service for a very long time, and then they had a number of challenges, and you'll be familiar with Essential 8 in Australia is a very big, push for many government customers and every other customer, in fact. This customer was a large employment services organization. They were managing the devices, but in order to receive funding from the government, they need to be compliant with Essential 8.
Yeah, right.
Two key areas that they pointed out that the management that they were offering, that we were doing for them, really didn't tick that box, because they were, one, looking to make sure that advertisements in the network were blocked through application hardening. It's one of the core components there.
Yeah.
So the DNS filtering was really important on that respect. The other one was multi-factor authentication. So coming back to what we were saying, why do you need something on top of Azure AD, was locking down SharePoint and having multi-factor in the network so that that device is in compliance with Essential 8, as well as all the patch management and benefits that get in from a device management perspective.
That's fantastic and brings a real kind of excellent tangible outcome of a real story. That's fantastic. Thanks for watching. Compnow provides IT built for you. For more information or anything we've shared today, or to discuss how your business can take advantage of these features, contact your Compnow account manager or email info@compnow.com.au.